All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Christopher Ruocchio. I'm the author of the Sun Eaters science fantasy series from Daw Books, junior editor at Bain Books, with more than 5 years of experience in the publishing industry, and lifelong Star Wars fan. Welcome. Saw we got a couple folks already in the chat this evening. Good evening, folks. Hope you're doing well. Today, we're going to talk about the fourth episode of the second season of The Mandalorian, The Siege, which was directed by Carl Weathers, right? Apollo Creed himself, written by Jon Favreau. And I think the best one of the season so far, personally. As with the last couple streams, we are, of course, going to talk about spoilers. For the episode, there's a bunch of stuff it's a little more substantial, would like to get into. We talk a little bit about where we might think things are going, what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. Very few things on that second score there. Matt's with us. Hey, good evening. Dennis is here too. What the hell? No spoilers? Oh no. Or wait, spoilers? Oh no. Yeah, Dennis, I've been doing spoilers on these. I don't want to ruin your day. So if you haven't seen the episode, folks, I'll try and I'll get to the spoiler stuff in a couple minutes so Dennis can hang around. I don't want to scare you off. Dennis, by the way, did the Red Company logo that goes on the video thumbnail. So big round of applause for Dennis. Thank you, sir. But yeah, we're gonna get into some of the stuff from the end there since there's some really cool stuff to talk about. But generally speaking, I think this was a great episode. Still a little bit on the short side. I was really hoping we'd get, like I've said before, 50-minute episodes out of the season. I remember reading a couple articles to that effect, and I think this one was more like 38, 39, 40-ish. That being said, it was about as perfect 40 minutes of Star Wars as I could have hoped for. Got a couple really minor quibbles with it. It definitely, we definitely found the main plot, I think, which is great. Matt, you haven't seen the episode until after this. Okay. Well, I will try not to be too heavy on it. But there's some really cool stuff in this. It is. I always struggle. I don't know how to talk about things without spoiling them. Besides, it was good. You should go see it. But it definitely did solve my. I'm waiting for something to happen. Thing. It does still have kind of that video game feel to it, where Din gets somewhere and he's like, "Hey, I'm trying to advance the plot with the kid here," and then some other person is like, "Great, we would love to help you with that, but before we do that, we need you to do a side quest, right?" And they've done that a lot this season, right? He goes to Tatooine. He needs to find, the Mandalorian. He finds Boba Fett's armor on Cobb Vanth. Cobb won't give it to him unless they deal with the dragon. Why Din didn't just kill Cobb? Din's not that bad a guy, right? He's not going to just kill someone if he can avoid it. And killing a dragon is cool. But there's been this, like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch your mechanic to the whole season. Same thing with Bo-Katan. Same thing with the Frog Lady. And now again with Greef and Cara, and great to have them back. Gina Carano and Carl Weathers, both awesome in this episode, and of course Carl Weathers directed it too, and I think he did a great job. The chase scenes and stuff at the end, all really cool. Oh, Dennis has seen the episode. He was fooling with me. Couple other comments here. Zach, the blue guy was basically wearing a still suit. I think Greef referred to it as a humidity suit in the episode. Yeah, I did. Or was it like keeping him cold? It was one of the two. No, it was, humidity. It was going to dry out. It was cool to see him back too. He was funny in that first episode and get a little more of the humor too. This did a really good job with the humor. It felt like that old school Han Solo 3PO banter back and forth between the Mythrol, the blue guy who was kind of an indentured servant, right? And the humor with him and Greef was really good. I mean, it had that old school sort of Star Wars humor too, which is another thing that was good about the eggs, right? A couple episodes ago, is that it had that feeling where it wasn't afraid to joke about things that were like a little bit, beyond the pale to some people's sensibilities, right? The eating of the eggs was obviously upset a bunch of people. It felt very original trilogy. It was tonally very Star Wars, which was great. and some really cool set pieces too. I thought Navarro was a cool planet last season. It's of course still a desert planet, but it's a black, gray and black and lava sort of desert planet instead of just sand. Really cool set pieces, though. I love the Imperial base on the cliffside. It reminded me of that level from Dark Forces with Kyle Katarn. Actually, getting into the end of the episode, since Dennis has seen it, there's some other sort of Dark Forces Kyle Katarni bits in it, but great action set pieces. The only thing that really bugged me was after Din flew away to go back to the city, he turned back up really, really fast. It's not exactly a Deus Ex Machina, but the timing was a little too convenient for my tastes. But it was. There's not anything wrong with it. It's just like, oh wow, he sure turned around really fast. But it was good to get the ship fixed and to get all that back on track. I was complaining about that poor ship taking a beating, last week. Let's see, Dennis, the writer in me wanted to give Mando some better comebacks, a little sarcasm. Ship could use some repair. What gave it away? This has been kind of something that's bugged me the whole series is the dialogue occasionally feels a little bit threadbare. Din is so laconic. He's like Geralt of Rivia tier laconic with his very staccato answers. I would like it if he had a little bit more to him. But they've sort of been moving in that direction, right, as things have gone on, right? He's clearly a much better, sort of surrogate parent, right? The bit with the child pulling the wires was funny, right? There's a lot of good, child moments too, like with the school and stealing the macarons. I guess they looked like macarons to me. Moments like that. The action sequence at the beginning with Kara was really, really good. I mean, obviously, Gina Carano was she MMA. I do not follow combat sports as much as you would think, considering my years of boxing. But she moves really, really well. Most actresses don't look very convincing in the part, but she obviously is awesome. So that was a really, really good sequence compared to some of the other stuff. Let's see. Zach, do you think those were supposed to be some sort of super soldiers in Moff Gideon's ship at the end, or is that just you? No, I totally think that is, if not explicitly the new canon's version of Dark Troopers, something very, very like the Dark Troopers. And that's the big question, right? We finally are getting some hints as to what the overarching plot for the series is going to be, 12 episodes in. It looks like Moff Gideon is building some kind of army, maybe clone army, or maybe he is cloning Palpatine, and we're seeing the early stages of the sequel trilogy, or specifically of the Episode 9 plot thread with the new Palpatines, maybe the Snoke cloning stuff as well, which kind of depresses me. There's been a whole bunch of rumor mill stuff about how Disney's trying to distance itself from the sequel trilogy since some of it was so unpopular, and it kind of disheartens me that we're plugging the Mandalorian into that aspect of the overarching plot. Maybe that's the only hint we're going to get of the cloning Palpatine thing, if that's what that was. But the music that played while they looked at the thing in the tank was really, really reminiscent of like the Darth Sidious suite or the Snoke music. On the other hand, they could be trying to make maybe not so much Dark Troopers as like a force of sort of mindless Inquisitors, maybe. Because I still have the sense that Gideon has to be an Inquisitor, and I may be wrong, right? But he's got to theoretically have a lightsaber fight with Ahsoka here in the next few episodes. I think Giancarlo Esposito's alluded to having done some lightsaber fighting while filming the season. So I'm expecting a lightsaber fight, and I really want one because the sequel trilogy's lightsaber fights mostly disappointed the hell out of me. I was complaining about the Episode 9 fights this morning. That's all I do is complain. And write. Just that's it. Those two things. But I'm hoping to have a really good one. And so I assume he must be fighting Ahsoka. And if he's going to be fighting a Jedi, he needs to be able to stand up, with the Force, right? Otherwise, it's going to be a really weird sequence. So I guess we'll see. But I do wonder if they're trying to, like you say in the comments here, Zach. I'm wondering if the Force sensitive stuff and getting the midi-chlorians, because there was a midi-chlorians reference in this episode, from the child's blood into the soldiers. Maybe the soldiers are what they're cloning, because it could go either way, right? There could be two things going on here, right? There could be the soldier plot, and there could be the deeper what are they cloning in the tanks plot going on. Because what's his name, Doctor, the scientist with the glasses who we saw briefly in the hologram, has a Camino patch, I think, on his arm. Maybe it's on his chest, I forget. But he's got a Camino cloning patch on. And so he's clearly cloning something. Maybe Palpatine. Maybe he's growing stuff for the soldiers. It could be two separate plots, right? I don't know. My instinct says there are two separate plots. I think maybe we're looking at the cloning thing, but also he's building an army, right? Dennis asks, can midi-chlorians be transfused? I don't really know. I was talking to my brother about this. This is when I was complaining about the lightsaber fights this morning. And midi-chlorians, I think, because I've never really looked at them too closely. Because, like a lot of people, I thought they were maybe missing the point. It was enough that the Force was magic. But I think midi-chlorians are not like mitochondria. They're not organelles. They are some kind of microorganism. And so they're not genetically linked, which is a little weird because the Skywalker bloodline is supposed to be strong with the Force or whatever, but are somehow separate. So if they're not gene linked, that would explain why a clone might not have Force powers. Because like Zach says, I was under the impression you couldn't clone Force users. But maybe the whole point here is they're trying to find a way to get around that. Obviously, the original Thrawn trilogy dealt with cloning Jedi, right? And maybe there's some of that old Tim Zahn DNA in this plot. Because obviously, the great thing about The Mandalorian is the way that it's been tried. And the great thing about Dave Filoni's presence in Star Wars generally has been the way that they take bits of what used to be in the old expanded universe and re-articulated into a new frame. I was originally really, really excited about the Disney acquisition because I thought, hey, the EU is kind of a big mess. It's got some really, really good bits. Thrawn. It's got some really, really stupid bits. The Yuuzhan Vong, I don't like them. They don't feel like Star Wars to me. And maybe because there's so much of it, taking the best ideas and stitching it back together into a really coherent, centrally controlled narrative would be a good idea. They immediately, of course, failed to do that by kind of remaking Episode 4, which wasn't a huge crime. Like we've talked about, I felt that was kind of a reasonable choice. But then they immediately, started passing the baton between directors for each movie and giving them total, creative license in terms of which way they want to take things. And so you have a trilogy that pulls in all these different directions. And so my hope that they would take all the really, really good ideas, boil everything down into a nice syrup and create something sensible and clear with all the really good ideas that didn't kill Chewbacca by dropping a moon on him. Sorry, Bob Salvatore. Didn't I think he still gets hell for that, honestly. I have friends who know R.A. Salvatore, and he apparently still suffers for killing Chewbacca in that book. But take all the good ideas and weave it, into something new. I don't think they quite did that. But it is nice when they actually still do something like that. One of the reasons, like I've said before, that I like Kylo Ren is because he's not Darth Vader, right? And that's consciously part of his character. That was a good design decision as far as I'm concerned. But they totally got that from the Jason Solo, Darth Caedus thing, which is about the last bit of the old EU I really paid close attention to, because I was a huge Star Wars reader as a kid, and as I started to grow up, I turned my attention to reading other things. And Star Wars kind of dropped off after 2005. There was other reading to be done, but it was cool that they're pulling these ideas back. If those are dark troopers, right, they got another good idea. Hopefully Kyle Katarn is not far behind. I know my friend Marek, if he watches this, will be excited at that possibility. He was super bummed that Kyle didn't turn up in Rogue One. We'll see. Kyle is fun. So we'll see what they do. But I like when they grab these little ideas, right? So maybe Dark Troopers, it's sure what they looked like, but it might be Kmart brand Dark Troopers, might be off-brand Dark Troopers. So we'll see. Let's see. I missed a couple comments here. Zach Tobin, I was always under the impression Star Wars canon. You can. Oh, I read that one. I'm sorry, guys. Dennis, maybe midichlorians are more like gut biome. Yeah, that was basically the feeling that I was getting. Like it was sort of an epigenetic thing. Because and two, right? Your gut flora are separate organisms, right? It's a bunch of bacteria, and it's kind of the way that Qui-Gon talked about midichlorians as separate life forms at Phantom Menace, right? It had this feeling that they were some sort of like bloodborne symbiote that everybody's got, because they are in the blood, which is maybe a weird place for them to be, but who knows? Let's see. But yeah, so I'm hoping, right, or rather, I'm happy to see all these little pieces get pulled back in, right? Rogue One did that when they mentioned the wills, right? That was like some deep Star Wars lore that they were bringing back in. We're getting some more explicit name checking of things like hybrid crystals, right? Which the main films never had. There are always, there's one of the things I liked too about the whole Han Solo like giant warehouse ship bit from episode 7 was that it felt like a weird EU intrusion into that movie with Kanji Club and that weird, I forget what it's called, the monster that rolled around with the tentacles. It totally felt like it was out of some book, right? And not something that George Lucas would have done. It was like I would have left field. And I actually liked that sort of tone break. I think it maybe went on a little too long and kind of like it was weird that Han Solo was running this giant ship around with these and happened to be there. Oh no, wait, he had a tracker on the Falcon. Never mind. It's been a while since I watched the sequel movies, but I liked that whole little episode just tonally. And the show's done that a bit too, right? The two anthology movies did that as well, where they've got these different sort of these episodes that have different vibes to them, but that still felt Star Wars. That weird sort of base Cassian was on at the beginning of Rogue One, like didn't feel like something George Lucas would have put on screen, but it still felt like Star Wars. Let's see. Oh, Herbert Thornton. Hey, Herbert, welcome back. I was right about Fifth-Headed Cerberus. Now on to Shadow and Claw. I am so glad that you liked it. Like I've said last time you were with us. One of the things that's been a real joy for me, particularly in the last year, has been pointing readers at the writers that brought me here, right? And Gene Wolfe is probably the most fun writer to introduce other readers to, because he's amazing, but he's also more obscure, because it's always weird when I talk up like Frank Herbert, right? Because everybody's read Dune, right? Gene Wolfe's more obscure, and so it's fun to actually get people to go in there. So I'm so glad that you enjoyed it, and I really hope you like Book of the New Sun. Book of the New Sun, like I said, was a big influence on my work, although a weird one, because I got into it after I'd finished book 1, so a little bit of it snuck in revision, but since then. Particularly the way that Gene approaches language and world building has really altered some of my later work. So I owe a lot to him, and he's just great. Speaking of, it's been a little bit of a slow writing week. I figure I should give you guys a bit of a writing update while you're here. We'll hide it in the middle of the Star Wars stream for the people who will not otherwise listen to it. I haven't gotten that much done because my boss was in town. And so work got really stressful and cranked up. She hadn't been in several months because of the whole global crisis, and so I haven't gotten that much done. I'm also working on putting that office in upstairs, so I had contractors in and out giving me quotes. But I was getting back to it right before we did this. So I'm hoping over the weekend we'll make some progress. But I am in the last quarter. I'm downhill in that last 25%. So it's coming along. Hopefully just after New Year's, I'll have some news about titles and release dates. I haven't been cleared to release the damn title yet. If you guys listened to the upload video, not much, or the update video that I uploaded, geez, that was a mess. Then you probably heard most of that already. But if you didn't catch it, that's where I'm at right now. But man, it's hard when the episode is that good, to find so much to talk about, because it was just fun, right? There was the whole like base thing. It felt very episode 4. They kind of had to mess with the same kind of console that Obi-Wan messed with to get the tractor beam out of the way, and that was a nice little touch too. I really liked the chase scene with the TIE fighters. It was good to actually have these things back in place. Back on screen, that is. Sorry, sometimes my sentences wander off. This is why I usually have an editor. And I'm, it's going to take a little practice here at the live streams before I, get into full circus performer mode. Let's see. Dennis, I hit 94,000 words in my work in progress just 10 minutes before the stream started. That's awesome, man. Congratulations. Are you trying to do the whole NaNoWriMo thing? That's awesome. That's awesome. Bug Zero, totally curious. What are your feelings of the first 2 books looking back now that you're on book 4? Oh, man. Oh, Bug Zero, that's a loaded question. Mostly I feel really good about them. Obviously, it's sort of like seeing old pictures of yourself with a weird haircut, and you're like, oh, man. There are a couple bits where I'm like, oh, I could have done that better. The worst was when I opened Empire of Silence the minute I got my hardcovers. And I turned to the first page, and the first line of dialogue in the hardcover is missing a word. It's missing an is, I think, or an in. It's supposed to say something is in something else, but it says just one word, and I fell through the floor. We fixed it in the ebook and the paperback, but it just kills me. But Empire of Silence is a weird one because it had a different editor than the other books. My first editor quit. She went to go work at Orbit and helped launch Fonda Lee's career, if I understand correctly. I think that's what happened. But she did go to Orbit. I think Fonda Lee was an acquisition of hers. So I actually sat on the shelf at DAW for like 2 years. I sold the book in January 2016, and it came out in mid 2018. So I guess a year and a half. Sorry, let's be precise. Or 2 years and 2.5 years. Sorry. And so it had kind of a different process because that first editor's process was very different than my relationship with Katie, my current editor. And so it's just strange looking back at that, just because it was such a different period in time. I do think they've aged pretty well. I do think Howling Dark was a significant step up. Not that there's anything wrong with Empire, but I think that books 2 and 3 are significantly better because I learned how to outline. Empire of Silence, I didn't have a due date, so I just kind of brewed it slowly over years. I've talked a little bit about this before, how like ever since I was in like 2nd grade, I would write something and then I would throw it out and I would start over. And the whole process on Empire of Silence was sort of more organic like that. And because of it, that first editor, Sarah, was a little bit more heavy-handed with the edits. And it hasn't been the case with the second 2, because I write these gigantic, like 60-page outlines now. And that's really, really smoothed things out. But I really like Howling Dark. I'm really proud of it. I love Karn Sagara. It's always weird talking about characters that I made up and saying, oh, I really like, that was a cool idea I had. It feels like patting myself on the back. But it's really fun to write Karn Sagara. And it's very difficult, too. But it's fun to write those characters. Vorgosos was really, really fun. And I think that, and I'm really proud of those passages, those whole sections of the book. I know for some people they dragged a little bit, but because everyone's got an opinion, but I really like that section. And I really like all the stuff with Arenado Otiolo at the end. I think it came out really well. But no, I'm still pretty proud of those books. I know there are a couple of writers, actually Gene Wolfe, interestingly, refused to reprint and recirculate his first novel because he just thought he didn't want anyone else to see it anymore. I think it's called Operation Ares. But that's a good question. Let's see, Herbert Thornton. Did you see Mike's book reviews of Empire of Silence? I finished it right before he mentioned it this summer. Did he do a full review video? I haven't looked yet. I've talked to Mike a fair bit. I know he mentioned it in one of his weekly updates because I saw the thumbnail. Like, I better, go see. And it sounded like he liked it, but I didn't know he did a full video yet. I must have missed it. I'll go look after this. Thank you. I'm supposed to talk to Mike here sometime soon. We're gonna do an interview. I'm looking forward to it. He's a cool guy. We were talking about it was basically the same musical interests. I'm a big 80s metal guy. I think he might like Metallica a bit more than me, though. Just a feeling I got. I'm a big Dio fan in particular. Absolute legend. But yeah, I'll go check that out. Thanks. Let's see. Dennis said, no, not doing NaNoWriMo, 100K to 130 for submission. Been working on it over a year. Well, that is awesome, man. You're closing in on, it's really, really fun crossing that 100,000 word mark, or any big landmark. But that first 100,000 words is always really, really fun for me. At that point, it starts to feel for me like a book. I don't know what it is about round numbers, but it's really good. So congratulations on getting that far, brother. I'm glad to hear it. I'll see Zach Tobin, because they're so into developing advanced technologies and don't seem to have any moral qualms. Why is the extrasolarians haven't spawned a Murakami-like artificial intelligence? Who is to say they haven't? Is one answer. There may be some book ideas out there to that score, but the other answer is, of course, the Chantry is out there, and while their reach may not extend all the way into the dark between the stars, they do have spies. The Empire has spies, because the Empire, of course, has to keep tabs too for military purposes, not just religious purposes, on their enemies, and the extras are frequently their enemies. And so they are aware of some things. And so they've stopped sort of AI resurgences here and there. There are purges. That's definitely some stuff I want to write stories about after Hadrian is done. Of course, in Hadrian's day, the big question is about the Cielsen. And so while there are AI that are still around, Karn Sagara has one on Vorgosos. They got most of them. And so there are always cracks, right? This is one of the things that I wanted to critique about Dune with this series, right? That I wanted to do differently. The Orange Catholic Bible and the Butlerian Jihad seem to have basically a 100% successful enforcement rate, discounting the Ixians in Dune, right? Who are still not really making machines in the image of man's mind, but they're getting close, particularly after the passing of the God Emperor and the scattering, right? The Ixians and what's the other planet? Rhodolei? No, Rhodolei was Ix's original name. Richesi, I think. The Ixians have started doing more mechanical experiments. But it was still a pretty broad sweep across the universe. Nobody was tinkering with these things, and I wanted there to be more cracks in the armor, because of course there are more cracks in the armor. Nothing orthodoxy is never enforceable to 100%, right? There are always heretics, there are always schismatics, there are always reformations. These things just happen. It's the nature of the human universe, and so I wanted to get into that with the series, or at least with the world building, because again, Hadrian's story is focused on the Cielsen and the Quiet and the Watchers and the other bigger things that are out there. But I do really enjoy. It's weird to call the AI stuff the smaller scale stuff, but relative to the big sort of Lovecraftian cosmic stuff, it's smaller. And I really like dealing with human politics and the Empire as a state versus these other powers in the universe. And I do want to move in that direction as we move on. Dennis says, maybe the Extrasolarians kept a hold of some ancient technology. Their master AI, the great evil that will come, is called Microsoft Bob version 3. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there's... I thought about making the AI a little bit more obviously connected to historical software companies and things, but I thought maybe not. Don't want to get in trouble, but especially these days. Let's see. Herbert Thorne, you once argued against Frank's Chosen One critique. Are you saying Hadrian is going to become a flawed savior, if you will? Maybe. Like I've said before, too, I think about the writing almost like an experiment. I don't know that I'm right. I know that I have a strong feeling that Frank missed something with his critique of heroes. And I think I may be onto something, because I remember Tolkien didn't like Dune either. And my suspicion is that Tolkien found it too cynical, which is my feeling. And that's not to diminish my love of Dune, obviously. Nothing stopping me from loving things that I disagree with. But I'm interested to see if Hadrian becomes a flawed savior. Because Frank basically said that everyone that we've called a hero culturally was actually a monster in their own time, right? And to people on the other side of the equation. An angel is very often only the devil that stands between us and our enemies, to paraphrase Gene Wolfe. But the fact of the matter is that person still is an angel to someone, right? And the fact that someone may have to do terrible things to protect other people, right? Or to save a nation or a species, in the case of science fiction, is a question that I think is really interesting. And so whether or not Hadrian is a savior, flawed or otherwise, is something I really want to leave up to you guys. It's something I don't think Hadrian's going to answer for himself. So I'm interested with these last two books in particular to see how everybody feels. And to see if I was right. But that's something I think that I can only really judge in everyone else's reaction. Now, if there's, if everyone's really, really split, that tells me maybe I didn't do my writing very well. If there's like a 50-50 divide, Hadrian sucks, Hadrian's good, maybe I didn't run the experiment properly. We'll see. But if there's maybe, 10% of people who are like, Christopher betrayed me, this is terrible, I thought we were getting a critique of heroism, maybe they just didn't get it, right? So we'll see. We'll see. But I want to leave that up to you guys to a certain degree. I like Hadrian. I'm deeply sympathetic to him as a person. I feel bad for him. But I don't want to make any declarations about his virtue just because I don't think he would. So we will see. Zach Tobin, I think your take on it's more realistic than the Dune take. I like the fact there have been some rogue Murakami still hanging around. Yeah, like I say, I think they're just going to be cracks in your enforcement of any policy, right? Think about curfews, right? Lockdowns. We've had some experience with those in the last little bit. You can tell everyone they have to stay in their home, but cell phone traffic has clearly indicated that plenty of people are not going to listen, and they may have good reasons for it. I'm not going to judge anybody for what may be going on, but you can say everyone is staying put and someone's always going to go outside, right? You can say, we are going to ban something and someone will always find it, right? It's very difficult. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to ban stuff, maybe, but there are always going to be cracks. And so if you're depicting a world and you're not making a philosophical statement, and I am trying to depict a world, right? Tolkien said, right, he prefers history to allegory. I want to create a world. Then things are going to happen that shouldn't if the philosophy were perfect, because there is no perfect philosophy. There is no perfect enforcement of perfect law, even if there were perfect law. And that's something that is important to me with the world building, right? Even if the system is good, the people who run it will not be up to the task, and vice versa. Even the people who are in the system are wonderful, the system is going to still have problems. So dealing with the fundamental brokenness of things is something that I try to focus on with the writing. Dennis says Anakin never thought he was evil, even as he donned the helmet. Well, he realized it there at the end, eh? So yes, I mean, villains obviously think they're the heroes of their own story, but that's why I'm leaving it up to you guys to evaluate. Hadrian doesn't necessarily think he's the hero. I think, but you guys will have an even more distanced, clearer perspective. Budzero, any possibility of your cover artist rendition of the Cielson? I've gone from feeling they were just misunderstood monsters to Jason Voorhees terror status with the last short story you released. Yeah, glad you liked the story. Thank you. Any of you don't know, I did a story called Fire in the Sky that I put out with my friends at the Simultaneous Times podcast. I linked to it on social media. It will be on this channel eventually. John Paul, who performed it, has rights for the next 6 months after that. If he'll let me share it on the channel, I'll post it. But it was about a Cielson invasion of a small town on an imperial planet, and how scary that is. But as far as the question goes, yes, the plan, actually, Doc really wanted a Cielson on book 3, but Sirianni doesn't appear until the last, 2-3 chapters. And so I convinced them to push it off to book 4, because in the same way that Howling Dark is Karn Sagara's book, the 4th book, almost said the title, whoops, the 4th book is Sirianni's book. Absolutely. So it's going to show up on the cover of number 4 is the current plan. Now, Salesforce might change something, yank the rug out from under me, but that was the conversation that Katie and I had last year. The other really exciting bit of cover art news is I think we got Kieran Yanner, who's the cover artist for the series, to do one of the anthologies that I'm doing with Baen Books, my day job. I'm putting a collection together called Sword and Planet, and Sword and Planet is going to be sort of like old school Planet stories, like Edgar Rice Burroughs' sort of space fantasy adventures, which of course the Sun Eater is, and Star Wars is. It's my favorite sort of subgenre. And so Kieran's going to do the cover for it, and he's going to do the plan right now. And then, subject to some publishing chicanery, but I have a little bit more control here because I am the editor of this book, is to do that sort of old promo shot where Luke and Leia are, where Luke is like this. He's got Leia in one arm. This is before they were siblings, because that was obviously an edit. And he's got the lightsaber out. I want to do a version of that with Hadrian and Valka. And so that's the plan for that book. So we might be getting 2 Sun Eater covers here in the next, year or so, which is going to be pretty exciting. Will the Cielson be on both covers? In Australia, we have the alternate covers to the ones on your wall. Yeah. In Australia, the UK covers, because the cover the Australians get is the UK version. That one's going to be different. I don't have as much input with them. I give my British publishers a couple ideas, and then they come back with something. They're pretty married to the silhouette thing they've got going on. And so I don't know exactly what direction they're going to go in. But we will see. They'll definitely be on the US version, assuming things stay the course. So I'm very excited about these 2 pieces of art. We actually might be getting the Sword and Planet one here in the next couple months. Since we're starting, because for those of you who don't know, I work at a publisher, and we're starting in on that fall season now, and it'll come out in December of next year, that short story collection, or that anthology rather. Shouldn't confuse anybody. And that's going to have some stories in it by a bunch of different writers. I'm going to do a big Sun Eater novella. It might be like 9 chapters or something like that. But my friend DJ Butler's doing a story. He's got a really cool, like old school Fritz Leiber, like sort of swashbuckling, end of the world, dying Earth sort of thing, with a couple con men trying to fight in this crumbling city at the end of time. Who else is in it? Peter Faravari, the Warhammer 40K writer, is going to do a story for it. I'm really excited about that. My friend Nick recommended him. Read a couple of his stories. He's awesome. He said he's going to do kind of a horror thing. Simon R. Green's doing a story in that book too. My friend Susan Matthews, who's awesome space opera writer. She said her story is going to be kind of funny, so it's going to kind of run the gamut, right? But I'm trying to get a couple other people. Trying to get CJ Cherry if I can. Talking to Dahl right now about maybe getting her in. So we'll see. But I'm really excited about that collection. Really excited about the cover. Let's see. So glad they listened to you. Bug Zero says having the Emperor on the cover was perfect mood setting. I think that was the right move. I really wanted to actually do that Hadrian Valka cover for book 3. I thought it would be nice to show them together. That's why it's ending up on the Sword and Planet covers. I really wanted to get that picture, but we talked about it, and the Emperor was the better fit for book 3 because it's kind of the Emperor's book. Again, the same way that Howling Dark is Karn's book and book 4 is Sirianni's. Book 3 is kind of the Emperor's book, and so it makes sense. You know, you kind of want a motif when you're publishing a whole series. You want consistency, visual consistency across the series. Think about those Orbit edition of the Witcher books, where everything's got those red spines. They've got the images of Geralt consistently across all of them. You want books to look like they belong together, but you also want them to look different from each other. It's a fine line to walk, and so we want these sort of central iconic figures on each cover is the plan. It was sort of the idea, right? You see this with any series, right? There's always sort of a thread of continuity. Let's see. Herbert Thornton. How can so many people find flaw with Frank and still love Dune? If I mention PKD's Three Stigmata, they won't even hear it. I haven't read Three Stigmata. My Philip K. Dick is actually pretty thin. I've read Imposter, the short story. I've read Men in the High Castle, obviously, and I've read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, so I don't know that one. But as far as how people can find flaw with Frank and still love Dune, I actually think most people who love Dune don't quite get it, and I think they don't get it because I don't think Dune does what Frank Herbert thinks it does. Because I got in a couple arguments in the Dune subreddit of all places in the last couple months about this. I think most people read Dune and they think it's a straightforward hero narrative because obviously the Princess Irulan clipping sort of set up that Paul Atreides is this horrible monster, but in the narrative we only see him take revenge against the people who destroyed his family, right? The Harkonnens are clearly grotesque and predatory, and I don't want to say they deserve to die, but they're the villains. And the Emperor was complicit in their scheme, or it was the Emperor's scheme, really. The Harkonnens were complicit in the scheme to wipe out his family, and he gets revenge, and he becomes king of the universe. He gets the girl, like nothing, and he's faithful to her too, right? He has the opportunity to set up a harem here with Irulan, and he doesn't take it. Right, everything that Paul does is like classic, hero stuff, and we just get this note that it's going to turn sour. And the first book doesn't do that, and the second book picks up after the Jihad. We're told that Paul is literally Hitler and Genghis Khan times a billion, but we don't see any of it on screen. So I think the reason a lot of people don't like Dune Messiah, but they're like, "Oh, I love Dune, but those sequels, man, I just don't know." Is because they get whiplash starting that second book. I sure did the first time. I was like, I don't know about this. But I plowed through it. I read Children of Dune, and Children of Dune is pretty awesome. But I think he loses a lot of people because they just don't believe subconsciously in his premise. And so I think they love Dune despite all of that because the first book reads so differently. Now, I know a lot of people are going to disagree, and they'll be like, oh, it's obvious what Frank is doing in book 1. And fair enough. But I still just am not sure. I think most people get a different read on Dune than they do off the rest of the series. I'd be interested to sort of survey people's opinions on this. Zach Tobin. I answered that one. I'm sorry. I skipped a whole bunch and went back down. Let's see. Another one from Zach Tobin. Is there a reason why they do different covers in different regions? Yes. There are different publishers. So I have 2 different English language publishers. I've got DAW in the US, which is part of Penguin Random House. And then I've got Golanx over in the UK, which is part of Orion Books. There are actually only really 4 publishing companies. And I can't remember them all. There's Simon & Schuster. There is Penguin Random House, there's Hachette Media, and I think Macmillan. I think those are the 4 big ones, and I think they're actually all owned by like German like big corporations. So there are actually no English language publishers owned by an English language corporation anymore. It's kind of a sad state of affairs. But Daw's editorial team still operates independently. Penguin doesn't tell them who to acquire, how much to pay them, anything like that. They run their own checkbooks, but they work under Penguin's distribution system, right? So they make sure the books get out everywhere. That's all done centrally. The marketing is all done centrally. And Golanx has a similar relationship with Orion, as far as I understand it, but they are totally unrelated to each other. And when you sell a book to somebody, you sell sets of rights, right? So you sell somebody, dramatic rights, maybe, right? Some publishers do acquire your film rights. That's not the condition that I'm in, but you sell them. You can sell them world English rights, or you can sell them North American English rights, or whatever. And so I sold my U.S. Publisher North American English rights, and then went to the UK publisher and sold world English rights separately. So they have different distribution areas. My U.S. publisher gets the U.S. and Canada, and the British publisher gets the UK and the rest of the former empire, sans Canada, right? And so they've got different design teams, different artists. They have a different editor. I kind of have 2 editors. Jillian over in the UK, she does give me some notes too, but my US editor kind of takes the lead on the developmental stuff. And so they'll do totally different art direction, different markets, and they'll do their own thing, which is why that happens sometimes. You see that too with like foreign editions. My Polish edition has a totally different cover. It's kind of a weird one too. I kind of like it. But it's just different groups, different companies. Let's see. Is the short story collection only going to be an ebook? Not Sword and Planet, the one I was talking about earlier, with all the other writers' stories in it and mine. That one's going to be a physical book. I do like 2 of those a year with Baen, because one of the things I do as junior editor at Baen is put together these anthologies. So I've done, and they're usually reprints. Sword and Planet's going to be all original stories, but they're usually like I did Overruled last year. It was all courtroom stories, sci-fi courtroom stories. But most of those stories are pretty old. We had like an old Larry Niven story, and there's an old Heinlein, stuff like that. There are a couple new stories. I did a new story for it. I always do new stories in the books that I work on. One of the perks of the job, which is pretty nice of my boss to give me the opportunity to print these things. But Sword and Planet's going to be available in print. It'll be available digitally too, and I'll make sure everybody gets the news about that as we get closer to it. Writing the story for that's one of my first orders of business right after I finish book 4, because I actually have another anthology coming out in August called World Breakers with Baen that I gotta get a story into. That one's going to be all robot tank stories. So we're gonna fight either an extrasolarian sort of monster, or we're gonna fight a Cielson cyborg. I haven't decided yet. We'll see. So I got to do both of those. But the short story collection, that's a collection of all of my old stories that I'm putting out, that one is going to be ebook only for now. I'm calling them Tales of the Sun Eater. It's going to be 6 stories that I previously published in these anthologies I'm talking about, and in the podcasts too. I'm going to get the first 6 of them together. I'm going to add an original story to the end of that. And I'm going to clump them all together into one little book. It'll be about as long as The Lesser Devil, so about 50,000 words, about 200 pages. But it'll be digital only, because I'm going to do a few volumes of those as like $2 ebooks, right? So, I'm not going to run out anyone's bank account. But I'm going to put them out as little ebooks. And then once I get all the stories together in another few years after I finish the series, I'm going to go back to DAW. And my plan is to go to my publishers, right, and see if they want to do a big collection of everything. And I'll do like 2 or 3 original stories and add them to those. So if you want to catch up on the stories, grabbing those ebooks, definitely going to be the way to do that in the short term. And I'm going to throw some original stuff in there. The original story for volume 1 is going to be set during Hadrian's time in the Colosso. So we're going to see Gen and Switch and all the gladiators again. All the Myrmidons, rather, because there's a distinction in Hadrian's time. So I'm going to do that, but that'll just be a digital collection. And and then I'll do 2 more volumes like that. I think it'll be 2 more before I try to collect it all and get a hardcover done. Maybe that's the goal. But we're talking like that hardcover total collection of all my short stories might be like 4 years away, just depending on how long all this stuff takes. I don't know when stuff's going to get scheduled, because traditional publishing, one of the reasons that things like seem like they're taking so long to come out isn't because the book isn't written, right? Book 4 is almost done, right? I'm at about 75%. It's because the seasons between now and whenever the date's going to be are already scheduled, right? So with Bane right now, we're scheduled all the way through the end of next year. Sword and Planet's December 2021. We just put it on the calendar this week. So 2021's all plotted out. We're ready to go. In about 4 months, we'll start the spring season for Bane. And so publishing tends to work a little bit ahead like that. If I were to turn in a book to Bane, I don't know what Daw's schedule's like. I don't know how their back room stuff operates. If I were to turn a book into Bane tomorrow, the soonest it could come out was January of 2022. Now with Daw, we've already been talking, right? So they know what's coming. I'll have some information about the release date soon. I don't quite know what the deal is because this year has been so damn weird. But we'll know soon. Let's see. Dennis Meyer's Doom Messiah was the first book I read in one sitting. I think I did too. I don't know if it was the first one I read in one sitting, but I think I plowed right through it because I was just sort of uncomfortable the whole time. It's a strange book, and it wasn't what I was expecting at all. Because I was also in like middle school, so to watch the hero from the first book kind of become this like weird, Oedipal sort of tragic figure was a strange experience for me. But hey, we are getting closer to the hour. Maybe we'll do another question or two if you guys got it. We definitely got away from Star Wars there for a bit, but I'm okay with that if you guys are. I am going to do one of the more regularly scheduled Q&As here in the next week. It's about that time of the month. Actually, today is. I usually do them on the 20th. I know it's kind of redundant with the Mandalorian streams, and we're kind of doing book questions anyway. But I'm still gonna do it. I'm a creature of habit, and I've already made the thumbnail, so I'm already in for a penny. So we're still gonna do that in the next week. I'll probably get it posted, if not tomorrow, by Sunday. I'll have the link ready for everybody. But let's see, Dennis. How long is it taking these days? From the time something gets selected out of the slush pile until someone might hear back. Talking about submissions with Bane. So I think right now it's at about a year. As you know, our reader had some personal trouble. I won't say too much about it on the stream, of course, but the gentleman we have who reads all the submissions we get had some trouble there. And then this year's been so weird too. He hasn't really been able to catch up. So I think we're looking at about a year turnaround time on the slush read right now. But once it leaves the slush, I'm sorry. I don't actually know. Talking about when one of the editors, because the way publishing works, right? If you're not going through an agent, you submit to the publisher, it goes in a big stack, and they read it eventually. And if it's bad, they'll throw it out instantaneously. If it's good, they'll look at it and they'll pass it up to another editor. I don't know what the turnaround time on the editors after the slush pile is right now, because we got 3 editors. They all read at different rates. Depending on one thing and another, it could be a week, but it could also be months. So it's a really difficult question. Sorry, Dennis. Bug Zero. Okay, well, Star Wars. Taking bets on the final showdown with Mando. That's a really good question, because Boba Fett's got to come back, right? They're not just gonna show him in the final scene of the premiere episode of the season and treat that like a Marvel movie after credits scene and like backdoor him for his pilot, right? That's not all that's going to happen, surely. I assume next episode, to bring it back around, we're obviously going to see Ahsoka. I think I saw a rumor earlier, because the only thing I actually check Reddit for is Star Wars leaks. I've been doing this since The Last Jedi because I was perversely excited about that movie. The marketing campaign was really persuasive. If the rumor is the episode's called The Jedi, So and I don't think they've been wrong yet. So I'm sure we're seeing Ahsoka next week, which means we're probably seeing Rex, which is going to be awesome. You got Tamara Morrison in anyway. Why not let him play more than one character, right? Presumably, you don't have to pay him that much more, right? So I'm assuming we're going to see them, and we have to bring Boba Fett into this in some way. So I don't know if Din's going to end up fighting Boba Fett or on the same team with him. Maybe they're fighting Bo-Katan. I don't really know. I have no idea where the Mandalorian politics are going to go in this, because so much of our attention has been on the Jedi and Moff Gideon and all this. I'm sure that Gideon and Ahsoka are going to fight. We need a lightsaber fight. By God, we deserve one. And I seriously doubt Ahsoka's going to lose, right? She's everyone's favorite character, particularly Dennis's favorite character, if I remember correctly. And so I can't imagine she's going to lose. Sorry, I got distracted reading a comment here, which I'll get to in 1 second, Zach. But I can't imagine she's going to lose, because I think she's also getting her own spinoff, right? Disney's been announcing spinoffs for Star Wars, like they're going out of style. We're getting Obi-Wan, which I'm psyched about. We're getting Cassian Andor, which I'm interested in. And then there's that Leslie Headland one, which I don't really care about, because we don't know anything about it. And then there's, a rumor we're going to get a Bo-Katan spinoff. Now there's a Boba Fett spinoff, which might be a miniseries or what. So, I really want a big showdown. My hope is, now that we're finally getting somewhere, we're going to meet Ahsoka. We've got Gideon's cards kind of on the table with these Dark Troopers, that these next 4 episodes are going to be awesome. And there's sort of precedent for that. Like I said before, The Mandalorian's first season I thought was kind of lame until the last 2 episodes. And those last 2 episodes were really, really cool. Really ratcheted everything up. If they can kind of replicate that little swell, I'm psyched. I think this is going to be really cool. I think we'll know next week if we were right. If next week's episode is as awesome as we hope, and it's both written and directed by Dave Filoni, so I'm optimistic. Then I think we'll be in for a show. See, Zach said, I have a weird feeling it's exactly what they're going to do with Boba. Maybe they will. That I will laugh if we get through this and don't see Boba Fett again. Zach, you can tell me you told me so. But I will laugh. It's going to be awesome. Either way, I'm excited to see where they're going. There's a lot of cool stuff on the table. I really, really, really hope that this isn't just trying to retcon and explain episode 9, because The Mandalorian, I think it's doing a disservice to the show if it's just to prop up the sloppy writing job they did on the sequels. I think the show deserves better. And I really hope they're not doing that to these characters, to the actors, the writers, directors. I don't want it all to be in service of making Rise of Skywalker make sense. I just would rather they just threw it out, personally. I know some people like it, and that's totally fine. But I would rather this go its own way. So anyway, speaking of going our own ways, everybody, I will see you again next week. Not sure if I'll do it Friday or Saturday. We will see. I know it's a holiday for us Americans, but I'll see you then. And I think it's going to be a good one next week. I'm excited. All right. Night, everybody.